Hey there, welcome to Busy Horse Channel, where amazing stories never stop. If you crave mind-blowing surprises, epic drama, and perfect revenge moments, you are in the right place. Subscribe today and jump into tales that will leave you speechless, laughing, and wanting more. Incredible characters, unbelievable twists, and super satisfying endings. That's what Busy Horse Channel brings you every single time. Smash that bell and let's dive in.
Your end? It's only my beginning.
The faucet in our guest bathroom had been dripping for 3 weeks. Sarah kept mentioning it during dinner, her voice carrying that special tone reserved for my failures. Mike, that sound is driving me insane. Can't you just fix it? At 2 a.m, I finally gave up on sleep and grabbed my toolbox. The house on Black Maple Lane was silent except for that rhythmic torture device. As I twisted the wrench under the sink, I heard Sarah's voice drifting from our bedroom. She was giggling. Actually giggling, like a teenager with her first crush. "Last night was the best I've had in years," she whispered into her phone. "He'll never know. Mike's too busy playing with his tools to notice anything." I froze, wrench suspended in midair. 23 years of marriage, and my wife was discussing her affair like she was ordering takeout. "Leo, you're terrible," she continued, her voice thick with satisfaction I hadn't heard directed at me in months. "But God, you make me feel alive again." Leo. I knew exactly who that was. Leonardo Walsh, her coworker at Preston Marketing, the guy with the expensive suits and the BMW, who always made sure to mention his corner office when we met at company parties. I finished fixing the faucet in complete silence, each turn of the wrench punctuated by Sarah's breathy laughter from the next room. When I crawled into bed an hour later, she was fast asleep, her phone charging on the nightstand like a smoking tool. The next morning, Sarah hummed while making coffee. She'd put on makeup before breakfast, something she hadn't done for me in years. "You're up early," she said without looking at me. "Couldn't sleep, fixed the faucet though." "Oh, good, I was getting tired of asking." She sipped her coffee and scrolled through her phone. "I'll be working late again tonight. Big presentation tomorrow." I nodded and buttered my toast, watching her fingers dance across the screen. She was texting someone, and from the smile playing at her lips, it wasn't about quarterly reports. After Sarah left for work, I did something I'd never done in over 2 decades of marriage. I went through her things. Her laptop was password protected, but Sarah had always been predictable. Our wedding anniversary worked on the 3rd try. Her email was clean, but her browser history told a different story. Hotel websites. Restaurant reservations for 2. A Google search for how to delete text messages permanently. In her dresser drawer, underneath the silk scarves I'd bought her for Christmas, I found a hotel receipt from the Marriott downtown. Room 412, charged to her credit card 3 days ago, the same night she'd claimed to be at a client dinner. That evening I sat in my basement workshop, staring at the receipt. The concrete walls felt like they were closing in. I'd built this space as my refuge, filled with projects and tools and the satisfaction of fixing things. Now it felt like a tomb. My phone buzzed, a text from Sarah, "Working even later than expected, don't wait up." I grabbed my keys. The Marriott's parking garage was dimly lit, perfect for someone trying to be discreet. I found Sarah's Honda on the 3rd level, parked next to a silver BMW with vanity plates reading LEO1, subtle as a brick through a window. I didn't have to wait long. At 9:30, they emerged from the elevator, Sarah's hand on Leo's arm, both of them laughing like they'd just shared the world's funniest joke. She looked radiant in a way that made my chest ache. When was the last time I'd made her laugh like that? Leo walked her to her car, pressed her against the door, and kissed her like he was claiming territory. Sarah melted into him, her hands tangling in his perfect hair. I waited until they drove away, then walked over to Leo's BMW. The keys in my pocket included an old house key that had lost its purpose when we'd changed the locks 2 years ago. It made a satisfying screech as I dragged it along the driver's side door. "Liar" looked good in foot-tall letters across his paint job. For good measure, I grabbed a used wrapper from the nearby dumpster. "Thank you, inconsiderate teenagers," and placed it on his hood like a calling card. The next morning, Sarah's phone rang during breakfast. She answered with a cheerful, "Hello," but her face went white as she listened. "What do you mean someone vandalized your car?" she said, her eyes darting to me. That's terrible, Leo. Did you call the police? I continued reading my newspaper, fighting to keep my expression neutral. Sarah ended the call and stared at me. Someone keyed Leo's car last night, she said carefully. That's awful. A lot of crazy people out there. I turned the page. Maybe he should be more careful where he parks. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Bet you loved the ride last night. So did I. I'd sent it from a burner phone I'd picked up at the gas station, but Sarah didn't know that. She stared at the message for a full minute before showing it to me. Mike, someone's been watching us. This is creepy. Probably just spam, I said. You know how these scammers work. They send random messages hoping to get a reaction. But I could see the wheels turning in her head. The vandalized car, the mysterious text. Someone knew about her affair. She just didn't know it was me. The next few weeks passed in a haze of fake normalcy. Sarah became paranoid, constantly checking over her shoulder, examining every car in parking lots. She'd stop staying late at work, coming home at reasonable hours with tight smiles and nervous energy. Leo, meanwhile, had become a regular topic of conversation. He's thinking about getting a security system for his car, Sarah mentioned one evening, her voice carefully casual. Some people have no respect for other people's property. Terrible shame, I agreed. Guy works hard for what he has. The irony wasn't lost on me. Leo worked hard, all right. Hard at destroying my marriage. I'd started following them more regularly, learning their patterns. Tuesday lunches at the Italian place on 5th Street. Thursday evening client meetings that ended at the hotel. Weekend texts that made Sarah smile and disappear into the bathroom for 20-minute phone calls with her sister. My friend Danny noticed the change in me at our weekly poker game. You look like heck, Mike, he said, dealing another hand. Everything okay at home? Danny owned a boxing gym downtown, the kind of place where guys went to work out their frustrations on heavy bags instead of each other. We'd known each other since high school, and he could read me better than most. Just tired, I said, when work's been busy. Bees, I've seen that look before. It's the same expression guys get right before they do something stupid. He leaned back in his chair. You want my advice? Win in the ring, not in the alley. Whatever's eating you, there's a better way to handle it than whatever you're planning. If only it were that simple. The breaking point came at the Preston Marketing annual party. Sarah had been dreading it all week, constantly asking if I really had to come, if I couldn't find some excuse to skip it. But I'd attended every year for the past decade, and suddenly backing out would look suspicious. The party was held at the Riverside Country Club, all crystal chandeliers and forced networking. Sarah stuck close to me for the first hour, introducing me to co-workers I'd met a dozen times before. But I could see her scanning the room, looking for Leo. He made his entrance fashionably late, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Sarah's entire body tensed when she saw him, and I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. I need to use the restroom, I announced loudly enough for several nearby conversations to pause. Don't wait for me, honey. Mingle. Instead of heading to the men's room, I made my way across the room to where Victoria Preston, the company's founder and CEO, was holding court near the bar. Victoria was a woman in her late 40s who'd built her agency from nothing, and she had the sharp intelligence and no-nonsense attitude to prove it. Mike, isn't it? She said as I approached. Sarah's husband. How are you enjoying the party? It's lovely, Mrs. Preston. Though I have to say, you look absolutely stunning tonight. It wasn't a lie. Victoria was attractive in the way successful women often were. Confident, well-dressed, commanding attention without trying. She was also, I'd noticed, watching Sarah and Leo's careful dance around each other with the keen interest of someone who missed nothing. Why, thank you. That's very kind. She studied me with curious eyes. You know, I've been meaning to talk to you. Sarah's mentioned you're quite handy with renovations. I do my best, 25 years in construction before I went freelance. Interesting. I've been thinking about updating my home office. Perhaps you could take a look sometime? We talked for another 10 minutes about crown molding and built-in shelving, but I could see Victoria's attention occasionally drift to where Sarah was now standing uncomfortably close to Leo by the hors d'oeuvres table. Excuse me for saying so, Victoria said quietly, but your wife seems nervous tonight. Does she? I hadn't noticed. Victoria smiled, the expression sharp as a blade. I notice everything, Mike. It's what makes me good at my job. And what I've noticed lately is that some of my employees seem to think company time and resources are their personal playground. Before I could respond, she leaned over and kissed my cheek, her hand resting on my arm just long enough for the gesture to look intimate. The conversation around us quieted, and I could feel eyes turning in our direction. "Think about that office renovation," she said loudly enough to be overheard. "I'd love to have you over to discuss it. Soon." Across the room, Sarah's face had gone pale. Leah was whispering something urgent in her ear, but she wasn't listening. She was staring at me and Victoria with the expression of someone watching a car accident in slow motion. I excused myself and walked over to my wife, Victoria's lipstick still visible on my cheek. "Ready to go, sweetheart?" I asked pleasantly. Sarah nodded mutely. As we walked toward the exit, I heard Victoria's voice carry across the room. "Leo, could I see you in my office first thing Monday morning? We need to discuss your performance review." In the car, Sarah was silent until we reached the first red light. "What was that about?" she asked. "What was what about?" "Victoria Preston. The kissing, the flirting," I shrugged. "She's thinking about hiring me for some work. Successful businesswoman like that, I'm not going to turn down the opportunity." "She was all over you, Mike." "Was she? I didn't notice. I was just being professional." Sarah stared at me, and for a moment I thought she might say something about glass houses and stones. Instead, she turned to look out the window. "This is getting complicated," she whispered. "What's getting complicated?" But she didn't answer. The next morning, Sarah's phone rang at 7 a.m. She answered it in the bathroom with the door closed, but I could hear her voice rising in panic. "What do you mean, terminated? Victoria can't just fire me without cause." She emerged 20 minutes later, fully dressed and carrying her purse. "I have to go to work early," she said. "There's been some kind of misunderstanding. Want me to drive you?" "No!" The word came out sharper than she intended, and no, I can handle it. After she left, I made myself coffee and waited. At 10 a.m., my phone rang. "Mike, this is Victoria Preston. I hope you don't mind me calling directly. I got your number from Sarah's emergency contact information." "Not at all. How can I help you?" "I was serious about that renovation work. Are you free this afternoon? I'd love to show you the space, and we could discuss terms over dinner." "That sounds perfect." "Wonderful. Oh, and Mike, you might want to know that I've had to make some difficult personnel decisions today. Sometimes people forget that actions have consequences." That evening, I came home to find Sarah sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers. Her eyes were red, and she looked like she'd aged 5 years since morning. "They fired me," she said without looking up. "Victoria fired me and Leo both. Something about inappropriate workplace conduct and misuse of company resources." "I'm sorry, honey, that's terrible. She knows, Mike. Somehow she knows about us. And she's using it to destroy my career." "Us?" Sarah's eyes snapped to mine. "I mean, she thinks there's something inappropriate happening." "There isn't, of course, but you know how people talk." I sat down across from her and took her hand. It felt cold and small. "Sarah, if there's something you need to tell me, now would be a good time." For a moment, I thought she might confess everything. Her mouth opened, and I could see the words forming. Instead, she pulled her hand away. "There's nothing to tell. Victoria's just a vindictive witch who doesn't like successful women." "Of course she is." That night, as Sarah tossed and turned beside me, my phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "Dinner was lovely. Looking forward to working together. Some projects require a very personal touch." I hadn't sent that message, but Sarah didn't know that either. Being married to an unemployed person having an affair is like watching someone slowly poison themselves while insisting the medicine tastes great. Sarah spent her days networking and exploring opportunities, which apparently involved a lot of long lunches and afternoon meetings that she couldn't quite explain. Leo, meanwhile, had landed on his feet with a job at a competing agency. According to Sarah's carefully casual updates, he was doing well and staying positive. She'd know, of course, since they were texting constantly. I'd upgraded from the basic burner phone to something with better camera capabilities. Amazing what you could learn about people when you paid attention to their garbage. Leo lived in a glass-walled condo downtown, the kind of place designed for people who wanted everyone to see how successful they were. His trash told fascinating stories. Expensive takeout containers, empty champagne bottles, and most interesting, credit card statements showing he was maxed out on 3 different cards. Apparently, the BMW and the designer suits were financed lifestyle choices, not actual wealth. Sarah's trash was equally revealing. Hidden beneath coffee grounds and junk mail, I found printed emails from a headhunter, applications to companies in other cities, and a handwritten note that made my blood run cold. M doesn't suspect anything. We can make this work if we're careful. Love you. S. 23 years of marriage, and she was signing love notes to another man. I started spending more time at Danny's gym, working out my frustrations on the heavy bag. The physical exertion helped clear my head, and Danny's advice was surprisingly sound for a guy who'd never been married. You're getting stronger, he observed one afternoon, watching me pummel the bag with methodical precision. But you're also getting angrier. That's not always a good combination. Maybe anger is exactly what I need right now. Maybe, but make sure you're angry at the right people for the right reasons. He had no idea how right he was. Our daughter Jessica came home from college for a long weekend, and I watched Sarah transform back into the perfect wife and mother. She cooked elaborate meals, asked interested questions about Jessica's classes, and made sure we took family photos for her social media. But I caught the moments when she thought no one was looking. The constant phone checking, the distracted responses, the way she'd disappear for quick errands that lasted hours. Jessica noticed too. Mom seems different, she said one evening when Sarah was upstairs organizing closets. Different how? I don't know, nervous, like she's waiting for something bad to happen. Jessica studied my face. Are you guys okay? I mean, really okay? We're fine, sweetheart. Your mom's just stressed about the job situation. If you say so, but Dad, if something was wrong, you'd tell me, right? I hugged my daughter, breathing in the familiar scent of her shampoo, and lied through my teeth. Of course I would. That night, after Jessica had gone back to school, I made my first real move. Leo's condo building had security, but it was the kind of place where expensive appearance mattered more than actual safety. The parking garage was accessible from the street, and Leo had a reserved spot near the elevator. I'd been watching his routine for weeks. He left for work at 8:15 sharp, returned around 6:30, and usually went out again around 9 for dinner or drinks. Weekends were less predictable, but he was a creature of habit during the week. On Thursday evening, while Sarah was at her book club, which I'd verified was actually a book club, surprisingly, I paid Leo a visit. His condo was on the 15th floor, and like most people who lived in glass houses, he'd gotten careless about closing curtains. I could see him moving around inside, talking on his phone and gesturing wildly. The building's maintenance entrance was secured by a keypad lock, but the code was written in faded marker on the frame. Apparently, even expensive buildings cut corners sometimes. The service elevator took me directly to Leo's floor. His apartment door had 2 locks, a standard deadbolt, and a chain. The deadbolt was expensive and secure. The chain was decorative. More importantly, Leo had done what 90% of people do with spare keys, hidden one in the most obvious place possible. The fake rock by his door was so obviously fake it might as well have had "key inside" written on it. I let myself in and took a moment to appreciate Leo's lifestyle. The furniture was expensive but impersonal, like a hotel suite designed to impress rather than comfort. The refrigerator was nearly empty except for champagne and leftover takeout. The bedroom was dominated by a king-size bed with black silk sheets, subtle as a neon sign. I found what I was looking for in his nightstand drawer, a collection of Sarah's things, a silk scarf I'd given her for our anniversary, earrings she'd claimed to have lost, a framed photo of the two of them at some restaurant, both looking drunk and happy. Seeing that photo was like being punched in the stomach. Sarah looked younger in it, radiant in a way I hadn't seen in years. Leo had his arm around her possessively, and she was leaning into him like he was her whole world. I pocketed the photo and got to work. Leo's expensive stereo system was his pride and joy. He'd mentioned it at every company party I'd attended. It took me 15 minutes to carefully disconnect every wire and remove every component. I stacked it all neatly in his bathtub, then filled the tub with water. His car keys were on the kitchen counter. I took them down to the garage and used super glue on every lock. Door handles, trunk, even the gas cap. Then I found a can of spray paint in the building's maintenance room and decorated his garage wall with "Home Wrecker" in foot-tall letters, right where he'd see it every time he parked. For the finishing touch, I left Sarah's silk scarf on his pillow with a note written in block letters, "Hope you earned it." The next morning, Sarah's phone started ringing at 6 a.m. "What do you mean someone broke into your apartment?" she said, her voice rising to a near shriek. What did they take? What did they do? She listened for several minutes, her face cycling through confusion, horror, and panic. They took your stereo and put it in the bathtub? Why would someone do that? That's insane. More listening, then, what scarf? I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't seen my blue scarf in months. After she hung up, Sarah sat at the kitchen table in her robe, staring at nothing. Leo's had some trouble, she said finally. What kind of trouble? Someone broke into his apartment and vandalized his car. The police think it might be connected to what happened at the hotel. What happened at the hotel? Sarah's eyes snapped to mine. Nothing. I mean, he was staying at a hotel when someone keyed his car before. The police think it might be the same person. That's terrible. Any idea who might want to hurt Leo? No, he's a good person, Mike. He doesn't deserve this. I nodded sympathetically and poured myself another cup of coffee. Some people just attract trouble, I guess. That afternoon, Sarah went out for another networking meeting. I followed her to Leo's building, where she spent 3 hours helping him clean up the mess in his apartment. While they worked, I sat in a coffee shop across the street and uploaded the photos I'd taken to a private Facebook group for parents at Jessica's old high school. The group was supposed to be for organizing carpools and sharing school information, but it had devolved into the usual suburban gossip mill. I posted the pictures with a simple caption. Warning, cheater on the loose. Thought you should know what kind of people are in our community. The photos showed Sarah and Leo at various restaurants and hotels, always touching, always looking guilty. I'd been collecting them for weeks, waiting for the right moment. Within an hour, the post had 30 comments and 50 shares. By evening, it had spread to 3 other local Facebook groups. Sarah's phone started ringing during dinner. Hello, Margaret, she answered, her voice artificially bright. How are you? The brightness faded quickly. I don't know what you're talking about. What photos? Long pause. That's not me. Someone's obviously using fake pictures to cause trouble. Another pause, longer this time. Margaret, I've known you for 15 years. You can't possibly believe I would do something like that. But Margaret obviously did believe it, because Sarah's face crumpled as the call ended. Everything okay? I asked. Someone's been posting fake photos online, trying to make it look like I'm having an affair. Can you believe that? Who would do something so cruel? That's awful, honey. People can be really sick. Sarah's phone rang again, then again. Each call was the same. Friends and acquaintances who'd seen the photos, some concerned, others clearly fishing for gossip. By the time we went to bed, Sarah had turned off her phone entirely. This has to stop, she whispered in the dark. Whoever's doing this has to be stopped. Maybe you should call the police, I suggested. Then this sounds like harassment. And tell them what? That someone's posting pictures of me with a coworker? They'll just think I'm guilty and trying to cover it up. She was probably right about that. The next morning, I found Sarah in the kitchen at 5 a.m., fully dressed and drinking coffee like it was medicine. I'm going to fix this, she said without looking at me. I'm going to find out who's behind all this harassment and make them pay. How are you going to do that? Leo has connections, people who know about computers and tracing things online. We're going to catch whoever's doing this. That sounds like a good plan. Sarah finally looked at me, and her expression was harder than I'd ever seen it. Mike, when we find out who's been stalking us, what do you think we should do to them? I considered the question seriously. I think people who destroy other people's lives deserve whatever they get. Sarah smiled for the first time in days. It wasn't a pleasant expression. I'm glad we agree on something. Sarah's investigation into her stalker became an obsession. She spent hours on her laptop, making lists of people who might have grudges against her, analyzing the timing of each incident, trying to trace the source of the Facebook posts. Meanwhile, Leo had hired a private investigator, a decision that might have worried me if I hadn't been so careful. Every move I'd made had been planned and executed with the precision of someone who'd spent decades solving other people's problems. The PI was good, but I was better. More importantly, I knew exactly what they were looking for because Sarah told me everything. He thinks it might be someone from work, she said one evening, showing me a notebook filled with names and theories, maybe someone who was jealous of Leo's success. That makes sense. Office politics can get pretty ugly. Or it could be a client we had to fire. Some of those people can be really vindictive. I nodded thoughtfully. Have you considered that it might be someone closer to home? Sarah's pen stopped moving. What do you mean? Well, whoever's doing this knows your schedule, your habits, places you go. That suggests someone who's been watching you pretty carefully. You think it's someone I know personally? I think it's someone who has access to information about your daily life. Someone you trust. The irony was delicious. Sarah was so focused on external threats that she couldn't see the enemy sleeping next to her every night. 2 weeks later, Sarah announced she was organizing a meeting. "I've narrowed it down to a few suspects," she said. "People who have the means and opportunity to be doing this. Leo thinks we should confront them directly." "Is that safe?" "We're not going to their houses or anything. I've arranged to meet them at the old recreation center by the lake. It's neutral territory, and if anyone gets aggressive, we can leave." The Lakeside Recreation Center had been abandoned for 3 years, ever since the city built a newer facility closer to downtown. It was the perfect place for a confrontation, isolated, private, and familiar to everyone in our social circle. It was also the perfect place for me to end this charade. "Who are you planning to meet?" I asked. Sarah consulted her notebook. "Margaret Hoffman first. She's been acting strange ever since those photos were posted, and she has a history of causing drama. Then Carol Peterson. She's been jealous of my success for years, and she knows computers. Finally, your friend Danny." "Danny? Why would you suspect Danny?" "Think about it, Mike. He's protective of you. He doesn't like me very much, and he has connections to all sorts of unsavory people through that gym. Plus, he's been asking you a lot of questions about our marriage lately." She wasn't wrong about Danny's suspicions, but she was completely wrong about his involvement. "When is this meeting supposed to happen?" "Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. Leo's going to be there for support, and I'm bringing Jessica home from college. I want her to see me stand up to these bullies." My blood went cold. "You're involving Jessica in this?" "She deserves to know what's been happening. Besides, having witnesses will keep everyone honest." I spent that night in my workshop, thinking through every possible scenario. Sarah was walking into a trap, but not the one she expected. She was about to confront innocent people, while the real culprit sat at home, planning the final act of their marriage's destruction. By morning, I'd made my decision. The recreation center sat on the shore of Miller's Lake, surrounded by overgrown parking lots and rusted playground equipment. I arrived an hour early using my key to the building. I'd done maintenance work there before it closed, and the city had never bothered to change the locks. The main gymnasium was dark and echoing, filled with shadows and the smell of mildew. Perfect. I spent 30 minutes setting up my surprises. Motion-activated lights connected to the building's emergency power system, a portable PA system I'd borrowed from Danny's gym, and several cameras positioned to capture everything that was about to happen. At 6:45, cars began arriving in the parking lot. Margaret Hoffman came first, looking nervous and confused. Carol Peterson arrived 5 minutes later, clearly angry about being summoned to this meeting. Danny showed up at exactly 7 o'clock, his expression grim. Sarah and Leo arrived together in his repaired BMW, followed by Jessica in her college-provided Honda. My daughter looked tired and annoyed, probably dragged away from her studies for what she assumed was another family drama. I watched from the building's second floor as they gathered in the parking lot, everyone talking at once, no one quite sure why they were there. Sarah took charge, her voice carrying across the water. "Thank you all for coming. I know this is unusual, but we have a serious problem that needs to be addressed." "What kind of problem?" Margaret asked. "Someone in this group has been stalking me and Leo, vandalizing property, posting private photos online, sending threatening messages. We're here to find out who and why." Danny stepped forward, his boxer's stance making him look dangerous despite his calm voice. "Sarah, if you think I've been harassing you, you're out of your mind. I've got better things to do than play games with your personal life." "Do you?" "Because you've been asking Mike a lot of questions about our marriage lately." "I ask questions because I care about my friend, and right now, I'm wondering what the heck you think you're going to accomplish with this amateur detective BS. Carol Peterson had been quiet until now, but she finally exploded. "This is insane. You drag us out here on to accuse us of stalking you? Sarah, you've lost your mind." "Have I? Then explain how someone knows so much about my daily routine. Explain how they got photos of me at restaurants and hotels." "Maybe because you're not as discreet as you think you are," Carol shot back. "Half the neighborhood has seen you sneaking around with your boyfriend here." Leo stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "Watch your mouth, lady. You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about. Everyone knows Sarah's cheating on her husband. The only mystery is why Mike puts up with it." Jessica had been standing quietly near the cars, but now she moved closer to the group. Mom, what is she talking about? What boyfriend? Sarah's face went white. Jessica, honey, these people are just trying to cause trouble. Are they? Because some of my friends have been asking me weird questions about you and some guy named Leo. The group fell silent, everyone staring at Sarah and Leo. The truth was finally coming out, but not the way Sarah had planned. I decided it was time to join the party. I triggered the motion lights as I walked out of the building, flooding the parking lot with harsh white illumination. Everyone turned to stare at me, and I could see the exact moment when Sarah realized she'd made a terrible mistake. Hello, everyone, I said pleasantly. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was homicide. Mike, Sarah stammered. What are you doing here? I was invited, wasn't I? You said you wanted to find out who's been stalking you. Well, here I am. Danny was the first to understand. A slow smile spread across his face as he looked from me to Sarah to Leo. Son of a witch, he said admiringly. You magnificent bastard. Margaret and Carol were still confused, but Jessica was putting the pieces together. Her face cycled through confusion, understanding, and finally disgust. Dad? You've been the one doing all this? Guilty as charged, sweetheart. Though I prefer to think of it as truth-telling, rather than stalking. Sarah found her voice. Mike, you're sick. You need help. Do I? Let's see. My wife has been having an affair for months, lying to my face, planning to leave me for another man, and I'm the one who needs help? Leo stepped forward, trying to look threatening. You've been harassing us, vandalizing my property, posting private photos online. That's illegal. Is it? I haven't done anything that isn't already public knowledge. You two have been conducting your affair in restaurants, hotels, and parking lots. I just made sure other people could see what I was seeing. You broke into my apartment! Did I? Can you prove that? Because I was at Danny's gym that night, working out my frustrations on a heavy bag. Isn't that right, Danny? Danny nodded slowly. All night long. I was worried about you, actually. You seemed pretty upset about something. Leo's face turned red. You're both lying. Maybe, but can you prove it? Because that's how the law works, Leo. You have to prove someone committed a crime, not just accuse them. I walked over to Sarah, who was standing frozen in the harsh light. 23 years, Sarah. 23 years I supported you, loved you, built a life with you. And you threw it all away for what? A guy with a fancy car and an empty bank account? You don't understand, she whispered. Leo makes me feel alive again. Does he? Let me tell you what Leo really makes you feel. He makes you feel like a fool. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the PA system I'd set up. Sarah's voice filled the parking lot, crystal clear and damning. Mike doesn't suspect anything. He's too busy playing with his tools to notice I'm getting the best love of my life from a real man. Jessica made a sound like she'd been punched. Margaret and Carol stared at Sarah in shock. But I wasn't finished. Here's another good one, I said, playing the next recording. This time it was Leo's voice. Your husband's a loser, baby. When we're together in California, you won't have to pretend to care about his feelings anymore. California. That was news to me. Sarah was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. Mike, please stop. You're humiliating me in front of our daughter. I'm humiliating you. You humiliated yourself. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth. Leo had heard enough. He rushed at me, swinging wildly, but 25 years of construction work and recent months at Danny's gym had left me in better shape than his gym membership suggested he was in. I sidestepped his clumsy punch and swept his legs. He went down hard on the asphalt, his expensive suit tearing at the knees. Stay down, Leo. You're embarrassing yourself. Jessica was sobbing now, her hands covering her face. Margaret and Carol were backing toward their cars, wanting no part of this family destruction. But Danny was grinning like he was watching the best fight of his life. This is better than pay-per-view, he knit. Sarah, you picked the wrong husband to cheat on. Sarah turned on him with fury. This is your fault. You encouraged him. Lady, I told him to work out his problems in the ring, not in real life. But I got to admit, his way was more creative. I walked over to Leo, who was still on the ground, and offered him a hand up. He slapped it away. This isn't over, he snarled. Yes, it is. It's been over since the night I heard Sarah planning your future together. You just didn't know it yet. I turned to address the group, my voice carrying clearly in the night air. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for coming tonight. You've all been witnesses to the end of my marriage and the beginning of my new life. Sarah, the divorce papers are on the kitchen table at home. I'm selling the house, so you and Leo better start looking for somewhere else to play house. Sarah was shaking with rage. You can't do this to me, Mike. I'll fight you in court. I'll take everything you have. With what money? You're unemployed, remember? And Leo's broke. I've seen his credit card statements. Leo's face went white. You went through my financial records? I went through your garbage. Amazing what people throw away without shredding first. I started walking toward my truck, then stopped and turned back. Oh, and Sarah, that recording of you talking about the best love of your life? I sent copies to your mother, your sister, and the HR departments of every company you've applied to. Thought they should know what kind of person they might be hiring. The sound Sarah made wasn't quite human. Jessica finally looked up from her hands, her face streaked with tears and fury. I hate you, she said to Sarah. I hate you both. Dad, can I come stay with you? Always, sweetheart. You're the only good thing to come out of this marriage. As I drove away, I could see the group breaking up in my rearview mirror. Margaret and Carol practically running to their cars, Danny slapping me on the shoulder and laughing, Leo helping Sarah to her feet while she screamed at everyone and no one. Jessica followed me home in her car. The next morning, I woke up in my own bed for what I knew would be the last time. The house felt different, lighter somehow, like a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying had finally been lifted. Jessica was in the kitchen making coffee, her eyes still red from crying, but her expression determined. Dad, I need to ask you something, and I want you to tell me the truth. Shoot, how long have you known? I considered lying, but she deserved better. 3 months, since the night I fixed the bathroom faucet and heard her on the phone. 3 months. Jessica shook her head. You've been living with this for 3 months, planning all of this, and you never said a word. What was I supposed to say? Your mother was cheating on me, so I decided to destroy her life. That's not exactly father-daughter conversation material. But you could have just divorced her quietly. You didn't have to humiliate her in front of everyone. I poured myself coffee and sat across from my daughter. Jessica, your mother wasn't just having an affair. She was planning to leave me, move to California with Leo, and take half of everything I've worked for my entire life. She was going to paint me as the bad guy, the boring husband who didn't appreciate her. Meanwhile, she'd be living it up with her young boyfriend on my dime. How do you know all that? I showed her the recordings, the emails I'd found, the evidence I'd been collecting for months. Jessica listened in silence, her expression growing harder with each revelation. She really was going to take everything, she said finally. Everything, the house, the savings, half my pension, and she was going to make me look like the villain for not understanding her needs. Jessica was quiet for a long time. Then, what happens now? Now I start over. I'm 50 years old, I'm about to be divorced, and I'm probably going to be the most hated man in the neighborhood. But I'm free. What about Mom? What about her? She's an adult. She made her choices, and now she gets to live with the consequences. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Victoria Preston standing on my porch, looking amused. Hello, Mike. I heard there was quite a show at the lake last night. News travels fast in this neighborhood. It does indeed. May I come in? I have a proposition for you. We sat in my living room, and Victoria got straight to the point. I'm starting a new company, smaller than Preston Marketing, more focused on crisis management and reputation repair. I need someone who understands how to solve problems creatively. I'm a handyman, not a marketing executive. You're a strategist who's been wasting his talents on home repairs. What you did to Sarah and Leo was brilliant, methodical, legal, and absolutely devastating. That's exactly the kind of thinking I need. You want to hire me to destroy people's lives professionally? Victoria laughed. I want to hire you to save people's lives professionally. But sometimes that requires destroying their enemies first. It was an interesting offer, but I had other priorities. I appreciate the offer, Victoria, but I've got some unfinished business to take care of first. Such as, there's going to be a town hall meeting next week. The neighborhood association wants to discuss recent events and their impact on property values. I think I should attend. Victoria's smile was sharp as a blade. That sounds like it could be entertaining. The Riverside Community Center was packed on Thursday night. Word had spread about the confrontation at the lake, and everyone wanted to see the next act of the drama. I arrived exactly on time, wearing my best suit and carrying a laptop bag. Jessica sat in the front row, having driven down from college specifically for this meeting. Danny was there too, grinning like he was expecting a show. Sarah and Leo were conspicuously absent. Margaret Hoffman was running the meeting, her voice shaky as she called for order. We're here tonight to discuss recent events that have affected our community. As many of you know, there have been some incidents involving harassment and public disturbances. Are we going to talk about what really happened, or are we going to dance around it all night? Called out Tom Wilson from the back of the room. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Everyone knew why they were really there. Margaret looked around nervously. If anyone has something they'd like to share about recent events, they're welcome to speak. I stood up and walked to the front of the room. The crowd fell silent. Ladies and gentlemen, I know why you're all here. You want to hear about my wife's affair, the confrontation at the lake, and what I plan to do next. Well, I'm happy to tell you. I connected my laptop to the room's projection system and pulled up my first slide. For the past 3 months, I've been documenting my wife's extramarital relationship with Leonardo Walsh. What I discovered wasn't just adultery. It was a systematic plan to defraud me and abandon our community. The first image showed Sarah and Leo at an expensive restaurant, clearly intimate. The crowd gasped. This photo was taken at Chez Laurent, where they had dinner on our 23rd wedding anniversary. While I was at home waiting for her to return from her client meeting, more photos followed. Hotel receipts, romantic text messages, emails discussing their plans to move to California. Sarah wasn't just cheating on me. She was planning to take half of everything I own and disappear with her boyfriend. Meanwhile, Leo was telling his friends that I was a pathetic loser who deserved to be humiliated. The room erupted in angry murmurs. I waited for quiet before continuing. Some of you might think I went too far in exposing them. You might think I should have handled this privately, like a gentleman. But let me ask you something. What do you do when you discover that the person you trusted most in the world has been systematically betraying you? I clicked to the next slide, showing financial records. Sarah spent over $15,000 on her affair. Hotel rooms, expensive dinners, gifts for Leo, all charged to our joint credit cards. Money that should have gone to our daughter's education or our retirement. Jessica was crying again, but she nodded encouragingly when I looked at her. Leo, meanwhile, was using company resources to facilitate their relationship, charging personal expenses to his business account, using company cars for their dates, even booking hotel rooms through the corporate travel system. That's why Victoria Preston fired them both. Not because of moral outrage, but because they were stealing. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. I could have divorced Sarah quietly. I could have let her take half of everything and disappear to California with her boyfriend. I could have been the bigger person, the understanding husband who just wanted everyone to be happy. I paused and looked around the room at faces I'd known for years. Neighbors, friends, people who'd attended barbecues in my backyard and birthday parties for my daughter. But I didn't do that. Instead, I decided that actions should have consequences. I decided that people who lie and cheat and steal should face the results of their choices. I decided to be the villain in their story so I could be the hero in mine. The room exploded in applause. Not polite, scattered clapping, but genuine, sustained applause from people who understood exactly what I was talking about. When the noise died down, I clicked to my final slide. I'm selling my house and leaving Riverside. Not because I'm ashamed of what I did, but because I've accomplished what I set out to do. Sarah and Leo are unemployed, unemployable, and unemployed. Their reputations are destroyed, their relationship is poisoned by mutual blame, and their dreams of a new life together have turned into a nightmare of legal bills and social isolation. I closed the laptop and faced the crowd directly. Some of you will think I'm a monster for what I've done. Others will think I'm a hero. The truth is, I'm just a man who got tired of being taken advantage of. And if that makes me the villain in someone else's story, I'm perfectly comfortable with that role. As I walked toward the exit, the applause started again, louder this time. People stood up, some of them shouting encouragement. Good for you, Mike! She had it coming! About time someone stood up for themselves. In the parking lot, Victoria Preston was waiting by my truck. That, she said, was magnificent. Are you sure you won't reconsider my job offer? Actually, I think I will, but I have one condition. Name it. I want to handle Sarah's reputation management personally, pro bono. Victoria's laugh was like broken glass. I think that can be arranged. 6 months later, I was living in a downtown loft and working for Victoria's new company, Apex Crisis Management. Our first major client was a tech executive whose wife had been embezzling from their joint charity. Our second was a politician whose business partner was trying to blackmail him over a decades-old tax mistake. In both cases, we solved the problem by making the antagonist's life more miserable than they'd made our client's life. It was satisfying work. Jessica visited me every few weeks, usually bringing stories about Sarah's continued downward spiral. The divorce had been finalized quickly. Sarah couldn't afford a lawyer, and Leo had abandoned her the moment the legal bills started piling up. She was living in a studio apartment across town, working part-time at a call center, and according to Jessica, drinking heavily. "Do you ever feel bad about what happened to her?" Jessica asked during one visit. I considered the question seriously. "I feel bad that it was necessary. I don't feel bad that it happened." "That's kind of cold, Dad." "Maybe. But your mother made her choices with full knowledge of what she was risking. She gambled our marriage, our family, and our future on a man who turned out to be a coward. She lost. It's not my fault." Jessica nodded slowly. "I guess I understand. It's just weird seeing her like this. She'll survive. Sarah's tougher than she looks, and she's smart enough to rebuild her life if she wants to. The question is whether she's learned anything from this experience. Have you?" "I've learned that being the good guy doesn't guarantee a happy ending. Sometimes you have to be willing to be the bad guy to get the ending you deserve." That night, alone in my loft, I poured myself a drink and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Sarah was probably doing the same thing, wondering how her perfect plan had gone so wrong. The truth was, there had never been a perfect plan. There had only been choices and consequences, actions and reactions. Sarah had chosen to betray our marriage, and I had chosen to destroy her for it. Some people might call that revenge. Others might call it justice. I called it Tuesday. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "New client tomorrow. Cheating spouse situation. Husband wants the nuclear option. Interested?" I smiled and typed back, "Always." Because here's what I'd learned about being the villain. Once you embrace the role, it becomes surprisingly comfortable. And in a world full of people who think they can lie and cheat and steal without consequences, there's always plenty of work for someone willing to prove them wrong. Sarah had wanted excitement, passion, and a new life with a younger man. Instead, she got unemployment, social exile, and a front row seat to watch her ex-husband become more successful and respected than she'd ever imagined possible. Leo had wanted a trophy wife and a comfortable life financed by someone else's money. Instead, he got legal bills, professional humiliation, and the knowledge that he'd been outmaneuvered by a pathetic loser with a toolbox and a plan. And me? I got exactly what I wanted. The satisfaction of watching my enemies destroy themselves, the respect of my peers, and the knowledge that I'd won the game they thought they were playing. Some stories end with redemption. Others end with revenge. Mine ended with both.